This is the third session, I suppose, of 5 sessions that we had set aside to examine the Old and New Testaments contents of mysticism. And we still have not even traveled through the New Testament, let alone have we had time to investigate the mystical aspect of the teachings found in the Old Testament. And I think by this late date in the progression of the workshop, we all have realized that we're not going to come close to mining all of the various mysticism and insights contained in this Bible. This Bible, I suppose, contains 3,500 years of the research of people who have pursued spiritual development, their insights, their experiences, their stories, their advice, and certainly 3,500 years of the collective journey of the Hebrews and the Christians down to this day is not going to be dealt with in any 5 sessions. So we're only going to touch tips of it. But it's an interesting thing. The good thing about it is that the truth is so holistic. It's like a hologram. And for those of you who know something about the physics that goes into the production of a hologram, know that one can split a hologram into 1,000 pieces and take just one of those tiny pieces and illuminate it with a laser beam, and it will reproduce the whole. Yes. So the Bible is, in some sense, a hologram. We can take 1 or 2 lines anywhere throughout it and turn our attention onto that and reproduce the whole body of insight that constitutes these 66 books. And so it is that kind of an effort that we will make as we continue our investigation of the mysticism in these books. And last week we were beginning to look in John. We have still to look into Luke and still to look into Mark. And we only peeked into Matthew. And each of these books of the New Testament, in and of itself, can constitute an almost endless series of workshops. But let us do what we can with the time that we have. Today we're going to continue in John, because John, as I said before, of all of the Gospels, John seemed to have, how do I put it, focused entirely on the mystical aspect of Christianity, more so than any of the other 3 Gospels. In fact, we can almost call St. John the great mystic. If there was anyone in the Bible who is deserving of the term entitled mystic, it would be the author of this particular gospel. I don't know if I would say St. Matthew the great mystic, or St. Luke the great mystic, or St. Mark the great mystic, but I'm perfectly willing to say St. John the great mystic and author of the Gospels according to John. So let us enter now into these sutras that have been recorded by this great mystic, author of this gospel. And we will begin with chapter 8, verses 12. Remember, it's my eyes. And she also will be working my mouth. You won't be able to see her mouth move, but I just want you to appreciate the level of her skill. So we will go to chapter 8, verse 12, because now we begin to really enter into the whole crux of the reason that these Gospels were written in the first place. I tell you, you have to understand that the question that every Christian and even non-Christian has to ask and answer, the question that each of the authors of these Gospels asked themselves and then in turn tried to answer, was the question, who do you say I am? Every Christian is asked that same question. Not just Peter. But as a Christian, you have to ask yourself, you have to answer Jesus' question. Who do you say I am? And what are my teachings? Two questions. Matthew, the book of Matthew is one evangelist's response, one evangelist's answer to Jesus' question. The Gospels of Luke is another answer. The Gospel of Mark is another answer. The Gospel of John is John's answer to the question that Jesus posed to those closest around. Who do you say I am? And what am I? And the answer that John gives, according to me, seems to come closer than all of the rest of their disciples' responses. And in verse 12, Jesus himself answers the question. Because sometimes the disciples are not spiritually mature enough to answer the questions, and therefore have to be given the answer. You have children, right? That have come to you with their homework, and they just can't understand this algebra. They can't get it. Their minds can't get it. And you can whoop them, and they're still going to get the wrong answer, right? You can punish them, take the toys from them, but the kid just doesn't have the mathematical acuteness to answer the algebra question. And so you have to give them the answers. And hope that by giving them the answer, it triggers something in them that makes it possible for them to understand the error that was causing them to not be able to work properly. And something like that must have been the case with the disciples of Jesus. Must have been the case that even though he had been with them for so long, they still didn't know who he was. All throughout the Gospels, their question to him, who are you? Who are you? Are you the Son of God? Who are you? Are you the Messiah? Now they're asking him this question as he's healing people and walking on water and raising dead people. And still they say, well, who are you? So even the miracles that Jesus wrought was not sufficient to enable them to see who he was. So Jesus has to tell them who I am and what my teachings are.
Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life.
This is Guru talking. And in there is a long tradition of recording the talk of Guru. They call it Guru Bani. The ancient Egyptian sages had a word for it. They called it Medunashet, divine speech. Guru Bani, divine speech. Gurbani, guru talk. When a guru talk, it's different from when we talk. You see. And you have to listen with a different ear. In these sutras now, Jesus is beginning to do guru talk. It's not just teacher talk, not rabbi talk, not preacher talk. It's guru talk. And it is this one statement more than anything that reflects that characteristic of Jesus that caused so much of a problem for the Jews, the Pharisees, and the other caretakers of religious authority. A guru always does that. Because a guru will always be more than a scripture. Always more than a Torah. Always more than a Bible. And Jesus says here, I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. What is this light? Consciousness. We saw earlier in John, where this word was made flesh and dwelt among us, where this light shined into the darkness. And we understood already that darkness represents the unconscious. Darkness represents lack of awareness, the physical, the material. And that light represents consciousness. And Jesus said, I am the light of the world. I am the consciousness. The world arises out of consciousness. All gurus have made that statement, with no exception. Jesus was not breaking new ground in terms of the overall history of mankind. He was certainly making radical statements and breaking new ground amongst the Jews. Hence the reaction that I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life. This is deep. Because Jesus now is telling you the benefit of the company of all gurus. I am the light of the world. I am the one who will impart to you the level of consciousness that allows you to move through this world in such a way that you can live. Because moving through your darkness, you are not alive. You cannot live. This is your dukkha. This is your suffering. As you move through the world, you simply are suffering. You are simply in pain. Your life is simply rooted in frustration, anxiety.
Ruben, please contact the courtesy desk. Ruben, please contact the courtesy desk.
And why? Because there is nothing lighting up your path. You don't know, can't see where you're going. You're simply stumbling and falling through life, breaking arms, limbs, in many instances, busting your head. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. The gurus all say the same thing. We are the light of the world. And he who follows me shall not walk in darkness. And you can imagine if you are walking along the path with a man who has a lantern, then you can see your way through your darkness. When you are following the Guru, when you are following a Jesus, then the light of Jesus' knowledge, the light of Jesus' consciousness is available to you, and you can see your way through the darkness of your life. With a Jesus, you can see your way through the divorce. With a Jesus, you can see your way through your unemployment. With a Jesus, you can see your way through your bankruptcies. With Jesus, you can see your way through your illnesses. You will find your way through your loneliness, your disappointments. You can see your way through there. You will not become full of despair and hopelessness. There is light at the end of the tunnel in the company of Jesus. And there is life you will be able to live. John 14:6. We will now look at John 14:6. Because Jesus again emphasized this point. Throughout John, you again and again find Jesus continuously reminding his disciples who I am. He had been asking them, who do you say I am? And then none of them had given the right answer. And then remember, he's getting close now. He began
Ruben,
his
please
guru
contact the
talk.
courtesy counter, Ruben.
He began his guru talk as his hour was coming upon him. As he became closer and closer to the cross, his language became more and more revealed. There wasn't much time now. Hence the statement. I tell you,
Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me.
you see, the question is from Thomas, doubting Thomas. There's a doubting Thomas in all of us. And Thomas has said to him prior to Jesus' answer that, Lord, we do not know where you're going. Because Jesus is telling them, you better walk while the light is in the world, because when this light goes from the world, no man can walk in darkness. Move in me. I'm going away. Where I'm going, you cannot come. And Thomas is full of this doubt. Where are you going, Lord? How do we know the way? We don't know our way. How will we find our way? And Jesus was reminding them, he said, I am the way. The Greek word was ego in me. I am. Period. He said, I am the way. I am the truth and the light. And no one comes to the Father but through me. All gurus have said this. Anytime we want to access the Father, remember, the Father represents the highest level of consciousness available to us. The Father represents that dimension of our consciousness that houses our divinity and reflects the attributes of God. And it is interesting that the word that Jesus used to refer to this dimension in consciousness was so intimate. He used the word Abba. And Abba is more like dad. It was a word that connoted the intimacy. Jesus was very intimate with this level. And he said that no one can come to the level of the Father in yourself unless you come through. That's how it is.
Ruben Owen, please contact the courtesy desk. Ruben Owen, please contact the courtesy desk.
Hope this not making you angry. We just talked about this stuff. I want you to practice, right? What I'm saying is not that important that you get angry about a loudspeaker, right? Jesus is saying what every guru has said. And if any of us want to come to the level of the Father, we will have to go to a guru. There is no exception. And now this is difficult. It was difficult in Jesus' day. It is difficult now because we are still trying to find ways to get around the guru. There is no way around the guru. Period. And this is what Jesus is emphasizing. And it was emphasized by many gurus before Jesus. It has been emphasized by many gurus after Jesus. There is no way to access the higher dimension of the consciousness unless we go through one who is already there. Jesus himself had to submit to baptism by this John. The disciples, out of their love later for Jesus, minimized the status of a John the Baptist. Disciples do that. You see. Our guru is always higher than all other gurus. But we make those kind of statements out of our love, you see. It's not factual. You see? It's not factual. About his guru, Jesus said, no man born of woman has been greater than this. Now Jesus himself was born of a woman, and he would say, I'm telling you, even including my birth of a woman, I'm telling you, there has been no man born of woman greater than this guru of mine, John the Baptist. You understand? Jesus practiced what he preached. And I got to go to John the Baptist because John the Baptist had the stuff. And Jesus said, and just in the same way, you got to come through me. You got to come through me. And the whole struggle of the disciple was not to come through. They were looking for another way.
Joseph Stevenson, please contact the courtesy desk. Joseph Stevenson, please contact the courtesy desk.
15 verses 1 and 2. So Jesus is continuously, you see, trying to make the disciples understand who he was and what his teachings were. And he had to use radical statements like these, statements that obviously upset the Orthodox Jews. Because it sounds as if he was blaspheming against their own teachings, that he had set himself up bigger than Moses. That he was now greater than the Torah. Because they were thinking that if you follow the Torah, nothing could be greater than the Torah. How can you be greater than the Torah? You have to remember that this book did not exist for the early Christians. There was not this New Testament. There was no Gospels. There was just Torah. Their Bible was the Bible. You understand? And Moses was the Messiah. And for 1,000 years, they had been able to disregard all other groups that had arose amongst them. And then this great group, this Mahaguru, Jesus, arose. And they could not destroy him, even by killing him. He defeated Judaism.
I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit.
Again, the language, and I just wanted to take a few, the book is full of it. Again, Jesus is giving some information about who he is. I am the vine, he says. I'm the true vine. Because there are false vines, and we'll be looking at that a little later. Jesus said, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine. I am the vehicle. I am the one. Anukasa, ahumbramas, amalhak. I am the vine. He could have said, I am divine, D-E-V-I-N. It would have been more accurate, clear. You see? And he said that every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. He said that those disciples, that everything in my Sangha that does not become fruitful, does not bear fruit. Bear fruit means does not imbibe and partake in my qualities, that does not do the work that I do. Every disciple that comes to me like that, he says, that fails to bear fruit, fail to live the teaching, fail to work on themselves, fail to do their savings, fail to develop spiritually. He said these branches that fail to bear fruit, my Father cut them off. He will find some way, something will occur in them that will make them leave. And he says that those branches that does bear fruit, those branches that does the teachings, that follow the teachings, he prunes them that they may bear more fruit. Those disciples that work at their side of life, you see, that higher consciousness in them descends into their life, prunes them, and make them not just disciples, but make them into gurus. You see? Makes them into gurus. Powerful. This is powerful. And so Jesus is really now, you see, speaking very boldly about who he is, what his function is. We have already looked at some of the teachings that he gave to his disciples. Now we will begin to look at a little bit more of the message that Jesus taught. And we will begin in John chapter 10, verses 7 through 15. 7 through 15. I'm glad Emma has eyes because I'm always the last one to find the page.
Then said Jesus unto them again, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out, and find pasture. The thief cometh not, but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they may have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. But he that is an hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leadeth the sheep, and fleeth. And the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep.
Here, Jesus is telling you, this is the characteristics of a guru, in contradistinction to the characteristic of those people who are false teachers, who are false gurus. He is setting out for us a clear example, because very often, how do you know? You see, that's always a problem for a disciple. How do I know whether this person is a guru or not a guru? Difficult. You yourself have not made enough spiritual progress to see the status of a guru. Maharaj used to always say, only he on high can understand him on high. But when we ourselves have not evolved to a degree of spirituality where we can perceive the guru for what the guru is, that is always an issue. And you can't go on just what comes out of their mouth, because people who can be brilliant otherwise could have studied a lot of books and literature, very articulate, speak like a guru, sometimes speak better than a guru. It's not unusual to find it, you see. And so if you measure just on what they're saying, their eloquence, the range of their knowledge, you can be deceived. And this is always a problem. And here Jesus is giving us some criteria to distinguish. In fact, he's making you aware that there's a distinction, because there's some people who have no critical faculties. And now just because somebody has set themselves up as a preacher or a rabbi or a teacher or a guru, then the person just blindly follows. Here's the symbol of the sheep. You see? And Jesus is trying to now help us understand the distinction between him and those who are simply pretending. The distinction between a guru and a preacher. The distinction between a guru and a rabbi. The distinction between a guru and a Pharisee. Because a Pharisee knows the teachings. The Pharisees who was persecuting Christ, trying to kill this Jesus, were scholars of Torah. They knew the Torah. You see. Fine, brilliant minds, as far as that goes. So Jesus could not say more accurately the contents of the Torah than they could say. They were his equal as far as mastery of the Torah, intellectually. And so Jesus now draws to us this distinction. He said, truly, truly I say to you, he's imploring that I am the door of the sheep. I'm the door. And whoever comes before me are thieves and robbers. But the sheep did not hear them. All who came before me. But he said, all of these people who have risen up as the Messiah. And remember, Jesus was not the first Jew since Moses to claim to have been the Messiah. He was not the first. There have been many who had claimed to be the Messiah. Just as in Islam, there were many people who rose up and claimed they were the Mahdi. In Buddhism, there has been many who have risen up and claimed that they are the Maitreya. And so, is the case at the time that Jesus lived. There have been many. And Jesus said, all those who came before me, you see, he says, were simply thieves and robbers. Because the sheep did not hear him. No one responded. Now when Jesus came, thousands of sheep heard. Thousands flocked to the sons. From all over they came. Not sincere, but performance. They heard. He says that I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he shall be saved and shall go in and out and find pasture. Anyone that comes through me. Any sheep. Because you have to remember, a sheep left on its own in the wilderness will be devoured. It will be killed by the wolves. But if that sheep came through the door of the shepherds, if that sheep came under the protection of the shepherd, that sheep will live and will enter his door into the pasture. Will live, will have pasture, will have life. Jesus continued, said that the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. He said that is the function of these pretenders. Most of these preachers are coming not to transform you, not to grow you spiritually. They're coming to devour you, to eat you alive, to divest you, to exploit you. That is their whole function. They're not interested in the spiritual growth of their organization. They will feed you chicken, not teachings, not truth. They will entertain you with beautiful songs and great musicals.
Joe
Their
Stephens, please contact
ambition is to
President,
rob
please.
you,
Joe Stephens.
to destroy your intelligence, to blind you. Jesus says that I came that these sheep, that us, he's talking about us, that so that we might have life and have it abundant. Because we don't have, look at our lives, there's nothing abundant in it. Everywhere you are impoverished. You don't have enough money, you don't have enough health, you don't have enough happy moments in your life, you don't have enough joy, you don't have enough nothing, you don't have enough life. Everywhere, every aspect of your life keeps coming up short. There is nothing abundant in your life, except perhaps misery. Got plenty of that. You see? Jesus says, I've come so that you, meaning me and you, can have life more abundant. I brought my light, my consciousness, and the knowledge to shine it into the darkness of your life so that you will have life more abundant. He says that I am the good shepherd. And the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Now this is the biggest distinction. Jesus said, the good shepherd, the guru, will die for his disciples. Mansur died for his disciples. A Buddha is ready to go to the cross for his disciples. No preacher is ready to die for them. The good shepherd will die for the disciples. Many of them have died. Paul was burnt up in a hut for his disciples. Socrates drank poisons. You see, history is replete with the examples of the extent that these gurus will go to for their disciples. You see, it's the good shepherd. He'll die. And this is the thing that distinguishes him. He's not distinguished by his level of scholarship. The Pharisees may actually know more about the Torah than the Buddha. But the Pharisees cannot die for him. In that sense. The master, Maharaji, used to work just around the clock. Just around the clock. Sometimes when we could go to the dairy, you would see us out there, and we all, we trying to get us some insight. There'd be hundreds of them. And we just work. All day. Some Maharaji would just go days, no food, no nothing, attending to the needs of the disciples. Their wives would, Kabir wife, tried to, used to abuse her. You understand? Kabir, the great mystic, was the victim of spousal abuse.
Scalded.
You see? Because he would be sitting out, instead of running the show, the store, he was a weaver. That's how he made his living. And he was poor. The woman and his children, they couldn't barely eat because this Kabir spent all his time sitting out there teaching every disciple that would come to him. And it would just go on all day. You see? And his wife, Roy, would become so frustrated. The only way she could get him to get away from these disciples, she would take hot water and just throw out there and scald them. You see what I'm saying? She scalded the man. You see? The same was the case with Socrates' wife, Antiphone. She scalded. Socrates was disfigured. His wife scalded him out there running your mouth with them people. You better get in here and do some carpentry. You see? Or whatever. But this is the price that the good shepherd will pay. He will lay down his wife, he will lay down his children, he will lay down his life for is disciple. No preaching, no letting is going to do that. Jesus continues, says, he who is a hireling, he calls him a hireling. He's a hired man. You pay him. He gets a salary to get up at the pulpit. He's a hired man. He says, it's just a job for this preacher. It's not his passion. It's not his life. It's his livelihood. Please make the distinction. For the good one, it is his life. For the preacher, it is his livelihood. Big distinction. And if another congregation offer him $50 more a week, he'll abandon you. He will drop you. You see? If another church offer him a little bigger car, he's gone. He will not renew his contract. His relationship with you is contractual. He's a hireling, Jesus says. He's not a shepherd. It's not a group. He says, he who is a hireling and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, beholds the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters. When this hireling see you falling a victim to your own sensuality, your own lust, your own greed, your own attachment, your own vanity, when he sees these wolves coming to eat you alive, he flees. He don't interfere with you. He don't say, do your budget, do your sermon, fight your... He's not going to mess with that. He flees, he leaves. Because he doesn't want you to turn on him. He's afraid of your anger. You see. The good shepherd is not afraid of your anger at all. He says that this hireling flees, he abandons you, and these wolves now snatch and eat you alive. This hireling flees because he is a hireling and is not concerned about the sheep. He is not asking you to do no Sabbath. He's not, the preacher is never going to ask you to do any meditation. He's never going to ask you to fight against your lust, anger, greed, attachment, and your vanity. He's never going to impose any kind of discipline and limitation on you. He's not concerned about you making any spiritual progress. He's really not concerned about you making any spiritual progress. He's not concerned about us manifesting our divinity within us. They're not concerned about that. They're only concerned about you coming to church, paying your tithe. You understand? And giving them a raise on this. They're concerned about being popular, well-liked by you, admired by you. You see? They're not concerned about you. They're hirelings. You understand? It's a profession. Preaching is a profession. They're professional preachers. They're Pharisees. Their job is to interpret. That's it. But there's no concern. Jesus said, I am that good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me. Jesus says, I am that good shepherd. I know my people. And they know me. They feel me. They know I'm concerned. They know who I am. They know that I'm there. You see? And they recognize it. They hear my voice. He says, even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, I lay down my life for these children. Very differently. As Emma locates the next set of scriptures, how are we doing the law on time? We'll be going to John 8, verses 13 through 30, while she's locating that. You see, Jesus has, in this short discourse to his disciples, drawn that distinction. And it's of immense help for those of us who still need the food because we're ready to come out of our darkness. And we are able now to avoid falling into the clutches of our heart. And remember, these harlots, not only will they not help you, they actually will damage you. The harlot will retard you. The harlot will feed you nothing but bullshit. Pure, unadulterated, holy bullshit. The harlot will tell you that you need to do nothing at all. Period. No work, no sadhana, no sacrifices. Just believe. Just believe. Your blind faith will lead to your salvation. And you will simply become stupid and retarded under their tutelage. Look today, you'll see it. Visit these churches and temples ran by these hired hands. Right? And look at the state of the people, the condition of the people. Look at them. They're not bearing no fruit. Their lives are just all messed up. All messed up. They have become retarded. Now they can't even understand teachings. Their minds, their intellects have atrophied, been cut out of their head. They've been lobotomized. They can't even think anymore. Their intellect has been muted, and they're just retarded. That's all. Number 13 through 30, chapter 15.
The Pharisees therefore said unto him, Thou bearest record of thyself. Thy record is not true. Jesus answered and said unto them, Though I bear record of myself, yet my record is true. For I know whence I came, and whither I go. But ye cannot tell whence I come, and whither I go. Ye judge after the flesh. I judge no man.
Again, you see, these Pharisees. And Pharisees, remember, we are the Pharisees. Don't get confused here. We're the Pharisees. We are the uninformed, unenlightened people who came to Jesus. We're made out of that. And the Pharisees, always have difficulty acknowledging the status of the people. Why? Because the Pharisees are the protectors of tradition. The Pharisees are the custodians of the old. And whenever they're confronted by the new, there's always resistance. The Pharisees were the custodians of the spiritual authority of Moses. Just as many of us still are the custodians of the spiritual authority of Jesus. And that there can't be any other messiahs. You see, anyone else that rises up today to do what Jesus did will be met with much resistance by us. You see? And they asked him, what is the proof? Prove that you are this weak. Prove that you are the one that you say you are. And they said, we can't go. You're just bearing witness of yourself. That don't count. Because in the Torah and Jewish law, they said there have to be two people to bear witness. Now they said, now that can be the truth. Doesn't matter. The two people could be absolute idiots, but as long as they're two. So they wasn't talking about the quality of the witnesses. They're talking about the numbers of witnesses. Just give us, if one more will bear witness, maybe okay. You see? But you're just bearing witness. These are just things that you were saying. And Jesus said, even if I bear witness of myself, my witness is true. The fact that I am is a witness of who I am. Profound was the answer that Jesus gave. Once when a doubting Thomas approached Ramakrishna Maharaj, who probably was one of the greatest Jesus in modern time. And the person had doubts about the Ramakrishna's status. Not only did he have doubt about Ramakrishna's status, he had doubt even about God. Says, what is the proof? Forget about, you claiming to be an incarnation, an avatar, and in Hinduism, the manifestation of God in the human form, the incarnation of God in the form of a human being, or when the human being attains the level of God consciousness, that person is referred to as an avatar. He said, forget about this claim that you are an avatar. What about so-called God? I'm not even sure there's a God. And he said, prove. What is the proof that there's a God? And Ramakrishna said, I am the proof that there's a God. And that is what Jesus was doing in his time. Jesus is the demonstration, the proof of the existence of a level of consciousness called Christ. Jesus is a proof and a demonstration of all that it means to be a human being. Jesus is some human being that has risen among us that demonstrate to us what it means to be God-like, what it means to be serious about God. Jesus was serious about developing his divinity. We ain't serious. We say we're serious, but we're not serious. Jesus' life demonstrated this is what a person who is serious about developing their divinity, this is what they like. And we need only contrast our life to this to see how far they fall. Jesus said, I am bearing witness of myself. That's enough. Ego in me, I am. He continues, he says, for I know where I came from and where I am going, but you do not know where I come from or where I'm going. Jesus said, I have been into my higher levels of consciousness. I know what I have. You don't know. You can't even get out of your emotionality. You can't even get beyond your sensuality. You cannot get out of your conditioning. You can't go where I go in consciousness. Jesus said, I can go somewhere in my consciousness, right? And it's because I can go to that place in my consciousness that I can demonstrate this kind of life, that I can demonstrate this level of righteousness. You can't demonstrate the level of love I can because you can't go to a level of consciousness that gives you the ability to demonstrate that level of love. Hence my teaching sounds so hard to hear, hard to do. Because you can't go nowhere inside yourself. It's too hard. We hear it even today. It's too hard. I can't do it. It's too hard. Why is it hard? You who have been endowed with all of the attributes of God, how can anything be hard for you? It's hard only because you can't go to the God in you. Hence, you're trapped. You're conditioned in your darkness. And worse, you have fallen in love with your darkness. You like being useless. You like missing your motivation. You like it. You love sin. You enjoy it. And that love of your own weakness, this infatuation with your own weakness, is the fact some of us, our weaknesses become the basis of our ego trip. I am weaker than anybody in the world. Look at the arrogance of this statement. I am the weakest. I am the greatest, weakest person in the world. It's arrogance. It's ego. Standing on his head. You simply stood your vanity on his head. It is upside down, but it is still vanity. Jesus said, where I am going, Lord, touch this, I'm going to. You cannot come to this. He said, you people judge according to the flesh, and I am not judging anyone. You judge according to the flesh. You look at this body, and that happens all the time. Now, if a guru comes as a woman, you're going to have a problem with that, man. You're going to have a big problem with that. Actually, it's really interesting because Jesus, being the incarnation of the Christos, the concept of the Christos, the creative attribute of God, prior to Jesus and in the distant past of the Jews, was always feminine. It was called Sophia. That what manifests into this world, the word, this logos, this Sophia, was feminine. I wonder how many men will claim to be filled with the Holy Ghost if they knew that that's intentionally feminine. There will be too, homophobic to acknowledge that they have the Holy Ghost. Right? But when you're filled with the Holy Ghost, you're filled with Chokma, you're filled with Sophia, you're filled with the incarnation and descent of the wisdom of Yahweh, which is feminine. It was always a wisdom to be such. Of course, it was later suppressed by these male chauvinist patriarchal men, right? Now, the Trinity is all male. You see this madness? Why? Because you're judging with the flesh. So, if the Messiah came in the form of a woman, 1 billion Christians will miss it. They think the Messiah is a male, or must be a male. It could be a male. Probably more likely it will be a male. It will be more consistent with the wisdom tradition. I would expect the Messiah in the female, because it is a manifest. The Holy Ghost and all of this is a manifestation of that feminine. And Jesus said, you people, you judge according to the flesh. Not only are you judging according to the appearance, but by flesh he means something even deeper. You're judging things based on your own emotionality and your passions. Your judgment is influenced by your flesh, your senses, your greed, your lust. Hence it is distorted. Your likes and your dislike dictates your judgment. Now that which you don't like, you have a very negative judgment. That which you like, you esteem, you hold way up. But this is madness, because you like your alcohol and then you elevate it. Alcohol is divine. Why should alcohol be divine just because you like it? We're not going to worship alcohol because you do. This is madness. You elevate your love. Oh, sex is divine. But you are elevated because you like it. You are depraved. You are locked into it. You see? Jesus said you judge according to your flesh, to the lower propensities in your nature. You say, I don't judge. Actually, the Hebrew will take John 12, verses 44 through 50, and then we will take a little break and try to process these sutras. 12, John 44 through 50. Did I say that like a preacher? Let me back up. 12, John 12, amen, 44, verse 44 to 50. Sister, I ain't gonna read that. All right. Now I know you feel more comfortable. All right.
Jesus cried and said, he that believeth on me, believeth not on me, but on him that sent me. And he that seeth me, seeth him that sent me. I am come a light into the world, that whosoever believeth on me should not abide in darkness. And if any man hear my words and believe not, I judge him not. For I came not to judge the world, but to save the world. He that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words hath one that judgeth him. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. For I have not spoken of myself, but the Father which sent me. He gave me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak. And I know that his commandment is life everlasting, whatsoever I speak therefore. Even as the Father said unto me, so I speak.
Now again, as I said from the outset, I wanted to share with you these particular statements as they are only found in John, because these are very bold statements. It's one of those rare opportunities in the Gospels where we are able to get a sense of the kind of answer fits the question that every Christian must answer. Who do you say I am? And what am I? This Christology, the study of Christ, this answer about Christ has to be arrived at. And it has to be arrived at even by those who are non-Christians. Because if your answer is that, well, this Christ was nobody, he was ignoramus, he was foolish, blah, 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 then that means you're going to miss something. You're going to miss something. Aren't you? It depends. If you say Buddha was not in line, you're going to miss something. You're going to miss Abhidharma. You're going to miss the Dharma Sutras. You're going to miss the Prajna Sutras. You're going to miss the insights of the Mahakashya. And if you say that this Krishna is nobody, was not a guru, you're going to miss Bhagavad Gita. You'll miss the incredible insights buried in the Mahabharata. If you say this Vyasa, the author of the Vedas, was nobody, you miss Vedas. You won't be enlightened by the Atura Vedas. You miss all of that based on your conclusion that you have reached about it. And there have been millions and millions of people who have missed Jesus because their answer to the question, who do you say I am, was in the name. And you just got it. And you have missed the answer. Here Jesus shares with us a few more details about who I am and what my teachings are. He says, he who believes in me does not believe in me. Now this sounds contradictory, don't it? He who believes in me does not believe in me, but in him who sent me. The disciple faith is not in the personality of the guru. The true disciple relationship to the guru is not ever at the level of personality. It may start at the level of personality in its infancy. But in the mature disciple, the level of the relationship with the guru is not at the level of personality. The disciple who has matured spiritually is able now to get some glimpse of the divine that is flowing through the personality of the guru. And it is that they are in relationship, not the personality. When you are just in the relationship with the level of the personality of the guru, this can become problematic. Because it's a personality thing. And as long as there's some harmony, the relationship is there. But the moment that the guru's personality deviates or becomes different than what your expectations are, that becomes incompatible with your personality, now the relationship. And many of us have done that. We have gone from so many people, from this person to this person, and the moment there's a conflict in our personality, now we left, we're gone, and now we're looking somewhere else. And again over here, there's a little conflict, and again we're running. And we do the same thing even in our personal life, not just our spiritual. Now one woman is a little conflicted, and you can't relate to your woman beyond the level of personality. Now you're ready to run. Or some man. Now there's some conflict in your personality, and you're ready to leave. The same kind of behavior is carried over into your relationship with him. Because you remain the same. And Jesus said, but he who believes in me, he who really understands me, he who has pierced me, he who knows that part of me that I am speaking about when I say I am the light of the world. He says, he who has faith and believe in that does not believe in me as a personality. He believes in the Father. He believes in this higher dimension. He believes in that divine thing that they see. And he said, and he who beholds me, behold the one who has sent me. He said, and if you can see my consciousness, if you can see the level of consciousness that I've attained, if you can look into me somehow past my personality, see my divinity, see this Father's faith that I have attained, it says you would have seen God. There would have been no difference. Why? Because the consciousness that is in us is the same consciousness that makes up God. This is a very profound thing. And that is the function of the guru. The word guru means one who dispels, who brings life. It is a compounded word. In the Sanskrit, guru means to bring, ru means life. Hence, the guru is the bringer of life. Jesus, I am the light. And that light enables you to see the Father. If in my light you look at me, you will see the Father. You will see God. You will have that answer that the gentleman went to Brahma Krishna said, I am proof that there's a God. Jesus has said something like this. See me, you've seen God. Proof. And for some of the disciples, you see, they did attain that level. They did attain that. They had to, of course, go through all of the stages of their initiation. Because you have to understand, initiation evolves. There's an evolution involved. You see my point? And the most progress is always made after the guru is gone. Please make it. It's when the guru is no more in the flesh. And remember, John is moving us through this narrative. Jesus is displaying his preparing and movement of those disciples through the stages. He's getting them ready, isn't he? He's getting them ready. Jesus says, if you behold me, you behold the one who sent me. You can taste in our consciousness, if you can imbibe, if you can get a glimpse, if you can see, if you can feel, if you can get in tune with me, in synchronicity, see me. We have seen God. He continues to say, I have come as light into the world, that everyone who believes in me may not remain in darkness. Again, he's defining the function of all gurus. The bringers of light into the world to remove our darkness, our unconsciousness. The guru has only one function, is to make you more and more conscious, make you more and more aware. That is it. That is the whole art. It has nothing else. There is no Decalogue. There is no Ten Commandments. There are no laws. There are no all of this other stuff. It's not a legalistic thing. It's simply a matter of increasing awareness. And if anyone hears my saying and does not keep them, I do not judge him, for I did not come in the world to judge, but to save the world. Now, the Guru said, you need not follow me. You need not do any of these things. I'm not going to condemn you at all. That's not my function. There's a law in the universe. We call it the law of karma, the law that mandates that you will reap what you sow. That will take care of you. Your life and all of the events that are happening in your life are the consequence of the operation of this infallible law of judgment. You see? The gurus do not come to participate in that, to condemn you. The priests will condemn you because their whole function is to create as much guilt in you as possible. You see? The Pharisees will condemn, generate guilt in you. You see? The guru has not come to condemn. It's not come to judge. It's come to save you. It's a difference. The hireling is not come to save. The hireling has come to create guilt in you. To tell you that you are just hopelessly full of sin. You understand? The Pharisees come to give you about 10 billion rules and regulations to follow. And if you violate any one of them, you will go to hell. It's a very different function. Jesus continued, he said, he who rejects me and does not receive my sin, have one who judges him. The word I spoke is what will judge him at the last day. The truth that I've spoken. That I have described this truth, this law. And that law is what will judge. The teachings, the things that I have taught you about will judge you. Now the gurus, they come and they teach us about karma. This will deal with you. The things that I have taught you will judge you. The laws that they have taught us, Jesus said, will judge us. I don't get involved. For, he continues, for I did not speak on my own initiative, but the Father himself who sent me has given me commandment, what to say and what to speak. Jesus said, I am not speaking out of my personality. This is not Jesus, son of Mary, talking to you. That's personality. That's identity. That's his story. Right? It is the Christ in me that is speaking to you. It is the divine consciousness that is in me that is also in you. Because remember, the whole purport of Jesus' teaching is that this God is in you too. I am just a demonstration of what the divine in you can look like. You see? I am like a magnet to draw it out of you. You see? He says, it is not me, personalities. It is the Father, you see, who has put this in me. He has given me the teaching. These are the insights arrived at through the insights available at this divine level of consciousness that constitutes his teachings. And I know that his commandment is eternal life. Therefore, the things I speak just as the Father has told me. Jesus said, I'm not deviating at all. I'm not mixing my own ego into it. I'm not mixing any personality into it. It's not personal. I am simply relating. I am simply a vehicle. I am allowing the insights that are generated by the level of consciousness that we call God realization. I am simply relaying that knowledge.
Moving on, please contact the courtesy desk. Please, moving on.
And he says that his commandment is eternal. He said, and this teaching that I give you is eternal. It's going to always be so. The teachings that these gurus and masters give us is always the same. They do not change. Not by a hair throughout the millennia have the teachings changed. It does not change whether it's given out of this culture or that culture. When you go deep into the teachings of a Jesus, you will find the same truths that you will find in the teachings of a Buddha. Truth generated as a result of attaining a higher level of consciousness does not change. It is eternal. It is timeless. So, with just these few verses, we are able to get a little more of a taste and feel now for this extraordinary phenomenon in the person of Jesus Christ that split this world down the center some 2,000 years. I try now to let you take a little break, and then we'll come back. We'll have any questions for a few minutes. Now we're back from the break, and so we can discuss anything that was said on the first segment, or for that matter, anything that's been said throughout both of the preceding workshops. And remember, I want to encourage you to select those scriptures from the remaining Gospels that you would like to turn and focus our attention on as well. So because I'm not going to be able to touch all of the scriptures. And there's a lot of parts of the scripture that we haven't even glimpsed that contain just, beautiful nuggets of mysticism. So don't be shy. So if there's any questions, any comments, yes?
I missed the first session, and June was saying something about, you said that there's doubt that whether there was a Jesus and whether they did this, somebody else's attributes to him, and some guy's name she called.
Yes.
Could you talk about that?
Yes. There are different schools of thought regarding the historical origin and accuracy of the Christ phenomenon. Even down to the doubt whether there was actually an individual named Jesus that even existed. But rather than start at the radical end of the spectrum, let's look at the part probably that June was referring to. She probably used the name Serapis.
Yes, something like that.
Okay. And during the time of the Ptolemies, Ptolemy the First, Lagi, called Sator, who was the one of the generals of Alexander, the Greek, or Greek, as some has called him, but Greek is an accurate description of Alexander. So Alexander the Greek, after he died, his kingdom was divided over his generals. Ptolemy was the one that kept control of Egypt and some of the other territories. And one of the things that happened, Dorothy, with every conqueror that came into Egypt, they may have conquered Egypt materially and then politically, but they were never able to conquer Egypt spiritually. In fact, quite the reverse. When they will come into Egypt, they will become Egyptianized. They will take on all of the religion, the spirituality, the art, the whole culture of the Egyptians. This was the same with the Greeks, who, in fact, before they came into Egypt, had no alphabet. You see, their own alphabet was handed down to them by the Egyptians. Well, at any point, one of the most coveted things that the conquerors who came into Egypt wanted was the status of the pharaohs. Now the pharaohs had always been looked upon as being the sons of Ra, the sons of God. Son in the sense S-U-N, the source that generated the vehicle through which the power of God flowed. Just as the sun is the physical vehicle through which physical energy flows into our solar system, you see? So sun was always understood to be a vehicle / generator of the energies that holds together not just the physical creation, but social creation, human society. And this position was exclusively reserved for the pharaohs, you see. And so naturally when you come in and you conquer people and you set yourself up on the throne as pharaoh, you would like to also become known and related to as the son of Ra, or the son of God, right? But this was not a privilege that was conferred upon these conquering emperors. And it was never conferred upon Alexander, and it did not confer it upon Ptolemy the first. But Ptolemy the first wanted that very bad, because it was necessary to kind of, stabilize this domain, because the other parts of Alexander the Greek conquered territory had already fallen in the hands of some of the other generals. So Ptolemy needed to elevate his relationship to his own territories so that he could have good, control there. And to do that, he needed to be looked upon as a legitimate pharaoh, because they were still just looked upon as, yeah, you got the power, but you're really not an authentic leader in the true Kemetic sense of the word, because you're not a son of God. What he was able to do was to bribe some of the Afro-Greeks, okay? Right?
Still have some.
And we still have some of their descendants among us today, right? So he was able to find some of the Afro-Greek priests and get them to help create a deity, if you will. And a deity that he could be the son of. Like the pharaohs were the son of Ra or Osiris, right? The sons of Osiris. Well, he needed a god like Osiris or Osiris that he could be the son of, you see? And so what they did, they put together a created deity, a man, a deity. They created one out of bits and pieces of the characteristics of Osiris. I'm just going in a little detail for you to appreciate it. And that deity they call Serapis. And so that now Ptolemy the first Lagi, or Sator simply means Savior, right? Became the son of Serapis. And it was on the fact of him being the son of Serapis that he was able to rationalize his being Pharaoh, right? So he kind of gave himself the status, the spiritual status of a Pharaoh. And to ensure that he had it, he began to shut down all other schools of the ancient African spiritual system. It was Ptolemy the first Lagi called Sator, the so-called Iska of Serapis, that destroyed and shut down all of the other temples throughout Egypt. In fact, he raped them and brought all of that literature to a library in Alexandria, the city of Alexandria. And he put all that material in there, and he called that the Seraphim, and that Seraphim, the house of Serapis, housed all of that information. It is interesting that those papyrus and scrolls that the Emperor Ptolemy had confiscated from the other temples and spiritual centers throughout Kemet was later destroyed by another Afro-Greek named Theodosius. So we have a long history of betraying ourselves. But the point is that this Serapis then was put out there. And that Serapis looked just like the Jesus image. It is the same image that was later created to represent Jesus. But you have to understand, it does not say that there wasn't actually a historical person called Jesus. What it is then is that representation of what that person looked like, that was nothing more than the same representation that they had for Serapis. Right? And as time went on, after about 700 years, the Christian church overthrew or co-opted the image of Serapis and associated it with Jesus. So they said, now this is how Jesus looked. You know, Jesus looked just like Ptolemy because Serapis looked just like Ptolemy. Right? And there was a lot of argument about that in the early church. They also ascribed, because when they transferred the image of Serapis to Jesus, they had to also transfer the qualities and attributes of Serapis that have been concocted by the early Coptic Afro-Greek Negroes, right, that assisted Ptolemy, you know, in the desecration and the transfer of the qualities of Osiris and Isis and Horus into this Greek created God. So they had to transfer those qualities. Now here was the problem. They had given Serapis a divine nature and a human nature, and you know, they had made him a trinity based on the transfer of all of the qualities eventually of Osiris, of Isis, and of Horus, right? And they transferred all of that to Serapis. So all that fell onto Jesus. Now they had to prove that Jesus was divine. And some of the Christians said, what are you talking this nonsense? He wasn't divine. But he was a very evolved human being. You see, he was a righteous human being, but he wasn't divine. You see? And his teaching was to teach us how to attain that same level of righteousness and human development that he had attained. And Christianity could stand on that alone. We need not go there, right? There was another school saying, no. If we don't make him divine, then how could he have died for everybody's sin? It doesn't make sense. Because a human being, however good he is, cannot die and wipe out the sins of the other people. And we don't already put that out there, right? In our dogs, right? So they said, no, we gotta make him divine. You see? And they said, and he was only divine. But that was another problem for yet another. Because they said, well, if he was only divine, he still could not have suffered. So, well, we got to keep him human and divine. But how to do that? How can he be both human and divine? You know, what they call ousis. The Greek word was ousis. So they came up with a concept at the Nicene Council where they created a homoousis. They syncretized the two things. It gets very interesting. But it was some that wasn't. Now we still got to worry about this Holy Ghost part. Because it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. How can we get this Holy Ghost in him, right? So, well, let's say that when he died, he came back in the form of a ghost that was holy and will infuse you with the spirit of truth, etc. So you had all of this going on, right? And these different schools was all fighting among themselves. You know, the separatists were the one that said that no, he's human, but he's not God. You know what I mean? Right? So the separatists was fighting for a particular dogma dominating. Then you had the adoptionists that said, no, he was a human being, and God adopted him because he was righteous, but then, you know, committed some kind, I guess, spiritual child abuse by letting his own son down the cross. I mean, it was wild. Now, with all of that, Dorothy, you had another school called the Gnostic school, right? That they were also trying to influence the shaping of the dogma of the early Christian church. You have to understand, out of this tradition had already arisen the Eleusinian mysteries, you see, all kinds of things, the Oracle of Delphi. I mean, all of these Hellenistic cults were there also. So all of this stuff is going on. And it is, in fact, it is because of all of that confusion for some 700 years or more that Islam was able to take such a great hold, because those people that responded and resonated to Islam responded because Islam is very neat and clean and simple and straightforward. You ain't got all of this confusion as to what is the true nature of Jesus. You see, that question that we were dealing with earlier, who do you say I am? Well, that had a million different answers, and all of them were fighting about whose answer was right. Finally, the answer that won set up the Roman Catholic Church, you see. And that's the one that most of us have really been indoctrinated into. But there was many others, you see. But in any case, a lot of people left that and went into Islam or went somewhere else. The Jews could never even deal with that. So it's just a fascinating history about that. But the name probably that June was referring to was Syracuse. And the conflict was probably between the groups that the historians and theologians called the adoptionists, the separatists, the monophysites, the diophysitic, you know, the dissetic. I mean, they got all kinds of names for these groups, you see. Yes, sister?
I would like to thank you for giving me your definition of the hard hand. Earlier in the week it was, I was sharing with a friend, I was in the darkest part of my life. She was sharing with me that this is exactly what I need to go to a quote-unquote church, you know, my family. And so we gave the definition because it's a hard hand. I felt better.
You recognize me? And we'll get to that. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And it's really something that those parts of the New Testament that we've read today and have been reading, with the exception of the Beatitudes and Matthew, you'll very seldom hear a preacher take those texts, the hard texts, the incriminating texts. They will kind of skip around and give you feel-good Christianity. You see? Feel-good Christianity. But that's how you know they're hirelings. So that's good. You pass that on, right? Very well. Yes, Javier?
You were talking about blind faith earlier, and it reminded me of this television broadcast I watched this morning. And you're familiar with the minister, I'm going to mention his name. But what he reminded his congregation of is, he says, put the same faith in your pharmacist. Well, put the same faith in me as you put your pharmacist. He says, when you go to a doctor and he writes out a prescription, you don't know what that doctor's writing out. You don't understand the type of drug that you're going to be ingesting. You take it to the pharmacist and you put your total trust in him. If he tells you to take it 3 times a day and he fills it with 100 tablets, you take it, you don't question it. So this is what he was advising his congregation to do.
And I can understand his logic, you see, behind that statement, because this is how you've been behaving everywhere. At least show me the same respect you show your pharmacist. Let me get a piece of that action.
Right.
You see, don't be trying to go intelligent on me.
Yeah, don't try to write.
Right, don't do it not in my house.
Yeah.
Wait till you get somewhere else to become intelligent. Just remain stupid here. And let me just fill you up with my prescription. This is not going to make you well. The person could have said, well, at least the pharmacist has some intent. Maybe it's medicine. They're trying to help me, maybe. I don't know what you put into me. But you're right, Javier. And that is always the ways of a hireling. They want to suppress your intelligence. And that really runs very contradictory to the Gospels. Even in the Gospels, you see, there's no suppression. Jesus is invoking, let's get into this, you know, let's exchange, let's go into this, let's go deep into this. You see, no preacher is going to ask you, his congregation, do y'all think I'm really authorized to preach? No preacher is going to say that. You know, it's dangerous. Jesus opens up the dialogue. He gets into it. Plus he demonstrates. So the very gospel that they purport to represent is being contradicted. Because they are hirelings. They are hired in. And they have a large staff, the deacon board, the usher board, the mother board. So it gets reinforced. Nobody is to ask any question. And if you ask the question, what could the eyes return? And if you act just a little intelligent, you become a great threat. You know, great threat. And that kind of congregation will retard you. And it has retarded. And that's what has happened to us collectively as a race. Is that most of us have been spiritually made retarded. And that has been really further encouraged in us through the educational system. So by the time you learn about religion and by the time you learn how to read and write and do arithmetic, you have pretty much been thoroughly lobotomized, pretty much thoroughly destroyed on the intellectual and spiritual. And one of the ambitions, Dorothy, behind the creation of the image of Serapis as the image to be presented of the deity was to get the conquered people used to worshiping a white God. Prior to that, any representation of deity was always in the form of an African. And that was true in all of the lands that Egypt conquered, which was significant and lasted a long time. Hence, the worship of Osiris and Isis and Horus was deeply embedded in the psyche of the world, the whole civilized world. And this was a war to wrestle from these conquered people, their spiritual dominance. We've conquered them physically. Problem with the Kemetic people, the Egyptian people, how you could not conquer them spiritually. They can knock the hell out of them, but they could not conquer their culture and their spirituality. And until you can conquer a people's spirituality, you have not totally conquered them. And Ptolemy, like all other prior conquerors who went into Egypt, was trying to conquer that spirituality, and he fought real hard. It was not until the Council of Constantinople II with the Emperor Justinian I that it succeeded. It took almost 800 years, and Justinian was finally able to line that image of Serapis with Jesus Christ, and now make the Roman Catholic interpretations of the teaching of Jesus orthodox and standard. And because he was emperor, he had the power to impose it on the throughout the whole Roman Empire. And he became the first European pope. Changed his name to Caesar Zero, Pope, Holy Roman Catholic Church. It's deep.
And this was who, Justinian?
Justinian I, the first European pope. One of the popes that helped the cause of Serapis was Sylvester I. He was Afro-Greek. What they call Coptic. Those Africans that abandoned their own Africanness to become Greeks. Right. So you can see that we have always had that kind of duality in our communities. Yes, sister?
Bob, I have two questions. The first one is, you said today, and you said before in the past, it's kind of scary to ask you this, but why do you say that the disciples made so much progress when the guru was gone?
Well, because you see, when as long as the guru is alive, the disciple is still going outside of himself. They'll go to, because the guru is there physically. And remember, it's very necessary. We talk about, for instance, the necessity of a living group. Now, today, for instance, from the sutras of John, from the Upanishads that John has written, we're able to get a clear insight into the necessity of a living guru. You see, no dead guru, no past guru, however great, can be of any use to us. Because we're in the contemporary darkness. We need some contemporary light. one of the functions, one of the things that happen, however, the downside of the living master's presence. Let me put it like that. And remember, I'm using this downside word very loosely. The downside is that when the guru is in the physical body, in the same level of reality that we're on, and if he's the good shepherd that is willing to die, and he usually does all the work, you see. It's only when the guru is gone now, you see, what the Christian mystics call when the disciple enters into the experience of betrayal. When the guru leaves, the disciple feels betrayed. You see, that I thought you were going to be here forever. I thought I always could count on you. You had all the answers. I could just, find you in the village and voila, you would solve all my problems. And then he go looking for the guru and the guru no more. He feels betrayed. Right? So when the disciple has to have that experience of the guru going away. Now later on in John, for instance, Pam, we read where Jesus said that unless I go away, the Paraclete, the Spirit of truth, cannot come to you. Right? And that is true. Until the master go away, you will not really seriously start working on yourself. You will not go deep into yourself. Because now the guru is not here, and there is no other place to turn that disciple. And they therefore have to go. You see? For the first time, you start really seriously moving in, or more seriously. Put it like that. So, it's a very necessary stage. It's a very necessary stage. And in any case, it's inevitable anyway, because the gurus are just in bodies just like us. These bodies gonna die for everybody, with no exception. Jesus died, as every human being has to die. Christ, however, is a whole different issue. Right? But if you're born, you're gonna die. That's the reality. And so by being cut off from the physical company of the guru, it moves us into another level of maturity. It's almost like, Pam, if you were, if you lost your parent when you were 15 or 16, you grow up. You know what I mean? Quickly, right? It takes you to another level. And you will notice now, when you lose a parent, when your mother and father is dead and no more on this planet, you automatically rise to a whole other level of maturity. It just kicks in. It comes. You see? It comes. So it's a necessary thing. Jesus said that therefore I must go away from you and prepare a place for you. True. Right? You will be with me then, but I must go away, otherwise you cannot grow from it.
Another person I always ask, once that happens, and the disciples enter to really go inside, does the disciples see the departed guru on the inside?
Of course. In fact, I don't mean to imply them that unless the guru did, we can't go either. I don't want to turn them into a sacrificial lamb. Really, right? I mean, very often you can go either, and it's preferable to go either, when the guru is with you. But that requires such a high development of the disciple. Only the most very coaches disciples really can do that. It's very hard when the guru is living to look upon him as a guru. That's the most difficult thing. It's very, very difficult to look upon the guru as a manifestation of the highest potential of consciousness available to human beings when that guru is in the body. It's very difficult. Very, very difficult. But you do have those rare disciples who are able to behold the Father, right, as Jesus called it, that was within you, who have seen me and seen God, and can have the appropriate inspiration and response thereafter. But that's very, very, very rare. Very rare. Yes, sir.
Last question. I got to
Well, listen,
sum it up.
Ruben Owens, please contact the courtesy counter. Ruben.
It's more like a statement and a question at the same time. Number one, I'm so happy that this workshop is taking place because, again, if I had a parakeet I would use the pages in that Bible for the dripping because, again, I had no understanding. But, you know, since you've been working with us with the book, the Beatitudes are so beautiful. They mean so much now. All right? I was like Dr. Ben Yakinen.
Yes.
You know, he dismissed that whole concept of Jesus. He's saying in reality that Jesus was Peru in hearts. And again, I think, you know, like most of us, we raised with this Christianism, all right? And I know for me, I personally just dropped all this stuff until this workshop. So I just want to say thanks for your tremendous insight.
You very well. And I hope that you did not drop Peru because in some respect they are one and the same. Because Jesus, like Peru, has come and came for the same purpose that Peru came among our ancestors, which was to restore my heart. You know, to restore us to that divine level of consciousness that we are all entitled to. It is a part of our inheritance, for we are all sons and daughters of God. So the message is not there. It has been that the sleight of hand by the European conquerors to Europeanize the truth that has caused all of this confusion amongst man, you see. And yet, with just a little light.
Sum it up.
I just answer questions.
You got to sum it up.
That was the last question. Now maybe next we can go over this. Why is it that the Jew is chosen? I mean, I'm sure in documents, but...
Right. Well, see, this is a good question because that feeling among Jews that they are chosen is the basis of anti-Semitism. Now, they may be the chosen people of Moses. That much I will concede. But Moses is not God. Moses, the Egyptian is the because Moses was an Egyptian. There's a very interesting book if you'd like to go into that. It's called Moses and Monotheism by Sigmund Freud. Most people don't know that Sigmund Freud wrote his very last books on dispelling the mythology of the uniqueness of the Jewish race. He himself was a Jew. And he, Sigmund Freud, you've heard of the guy. Moses and Monotheism. Right. And in it, Freud argued that the Jewish people were simply a group of people that were adopted by Moses. Much like, you know, you have John Brown was sympathetic toward the suffering of black people and he became an abolitionist, right? And worked on the behalf of the black people. Something like that similarly happened by, was done by Moses, who was genetically an Egyptian, all right? And so he had to build the people confidence. And one of the ways to build anybody confidence is to give them the experience of being the chosen, right? But when this is allowed to go to the extreme, this feeling that I am chosen very soon deteriorates into sheer arrogance. And you find that among the Jews that happened. So much so, especially in ancient times, that they would look upon non-Jews, Gentiles, as dogs, as animals. I mean, they weren't even human beings. And this triggered a lot of resentment, right? But the conflict between the Christians and the Jews also had a lot to do with who's going to be the chosen people. The Christian was saying, we're the new chosen people. And this hurt the egos of the Jews because they have been used to being the chosen people for 1,500 years, right? And now somebody's finna dethrone them and they didn't like that, right? And so naturally they needed to do everything they could to discredit the uniqueness of the Christian. And then the Christians were dethroned by the Muslims, hence the animosity, hence the fight, you see, and so forth and so on. But the Jews are no more chosen than anybody else. You see? And I think that Judaism will be able to attain a much higher expression of all of this spiritual potential that it drops this nonsense. This becomes why they become the captives of their books, their Torah, their law. Because for Judaism deteriorated into a contractual religion. It was a contract, the covenant with God. And it says that, well, God, if you know, God said, well, if you all do this, and this, you know, I will, you know, redeem you, take care of you, maintain, and just show you. But if you violate any of the laws, I'm going, you know, get in your ass, right? And so they begin to depict God as a very wrathful, angry God that'll do you in if you violate the Torah. It's interesting, in the Bible, you will find about 520 descriptions of God as angry, vengeful, and wrathful. Right? Will do you in. In Samuel, somewhere you'll read about a God that'll tell a Saul, go out and kill everything in sight. Man, woman, child, dog, don't leave nothing. You know, this is a scary kind of God. Now, who want to worship this kind of God, right? And people who worship this kind of God become threatened. You're going to wipe them out. People that worship a God that gives instruction to murder, rape, kill, and that has told you you chosen, and has given you a set of laws to perpetrate on me, the Gentile, we got to do you in. And they've been doing Jews in every community they're in every culture. And they turned all of that onto the Jews because of this arrogance that is generated out of this belief that they are chosen and are therefore in covenant with deity. And that anyone that is not participants in that covenant is not even human. And until they give that arrogance, they're going to be burning them in Auschwitz to the end of time. But read Moses in monotheism. And Freud argues the case. And he's a Jew, so he'll argue no passion.
But weren't we the Jews?
Hmm?
Weren't we the original Jews?
If you define Jew as the religion, spiritual system that was partly embodied in the teachings of Akhenaten, then in that sense. But in that sense, you see, we're also Christians, and we are also Muslims, and we are also Buddhists, and we are also Hindus. If we identify our self, our Africanness, with the spirituality of the ancient Africans, then we cannot be divided among any religion, because all of them, with no exception, have some portion or major portion of their theology derived from the theology of ancient black people, with no exception.
May I ask one
Yes.
Last question.
Last question.
Very last question.
It's a good session, huh?
You know, what is it about, you hear through the Nation of Islam about the whole historical analysis and perspective, the making of Europeans of the white man. And they all say that they raised them up from the hills and caves of Europe, and that the reason why they chose Moses because Moses taught them how to wash their ass and put on pants and stand up because they were nearly animals.
Yeah.
Is there any reality to that?
You know, whether it is any reality to it in a historical sense or not, certainly there's something interesting about that. Because if, as Moses said, that Moses was an Egyptian, an African Egyptian, who became very interested in the project of the Europeans who were in Kemet at that time, who didn't have any religion, who were barbaric in a sense, you know what I mean? I mean, it's not that far apart. But whether this European was created by Yakub, a scientist who learned how to split genetics, you know, it's a whole other issue. But if it is symbolic of the fact that all humanity had its basic origin out of this same genetic makeup that you and I have, then there's nothing bizarre or strange about that. That's just a straightforward fact. But whether, you know, they're, and if they were barbaric then, have we not become barbaric now? So doesn't it show you that, you know, we better hesitate before we throw some rocks? It may be all right for Ptah and those contemporary Egyptians to title them barbaric because they were building pyramids, while in fact these people were living in caves. But now you living in a cave and they're being seen as towers. So I wonder now if we have the right to speak on their barbarism.
All right.
I'll shake them.
I'll shake it.